Welcome again, everybody. We're happy that you're joining us today for our professional development series towards inclusive accessibility and libraries, expanding possibilities for all ages and abilities. And going forward, we'll use the acronym TIAL or TIAL as the shortened form of the series title. My name is Matt Geeza, and I collaborate on TIAL along with my colleagues Ashley Sklar and Suzanne Kiss. The three of us work in various roles and capacities within the Connecticut State Library's Division of Library Development. And you can learn all about TIAL on our LibGuide, and we'll be sharing a link to the TIAL LibGuide in the chat momentarily. We're here today for the fourth session in a multi-part series called Creating Accessible Digital Documents. This mini-series is meant to be an introduction to digital document accessibility, and hopefully at the end of each workshop, you have a sense of the key elements used to make different types of digital documents accessible. The mini-series will continue over the course of the next several weeks with the remaining workshop schedules for the next 2 Thursdays. And we'll share links to the upcoming programs in the chat as well. Today's program is focused on PDFs, and it's called Creating Accessible Documents PDFs. Before we get into the content, just a few housekeeping items. For the purposes of attendance, we ask that if needed, you please rename your Zoom name using the name that you use to register for this workshop. Zoom offers a live captioning feature, so please feel free to use and adjust the captioning as you need it. We are recording today's program, and the recording will be made available on our Accessible Digital Documents LibGuide. A link to the slides and tip sheet for today's workshop were emailed to registrants yesterday. So if you haven't seen that email yet, there are links to the slides and the tip sheet, and you can access those materials at any time. Throughout the morning, I'll pause periodically for questions. You're welcome to ask questions by unmuting yourself or by entering them in the meeting chat. Suzanne and Ashley will keep an eye on the chat, so you feel free to add your questions there, as well as any comments or insights that you'd like to share. We will be following up with you after the session with a brief survey. So when you receive the survey link, we ask that you take a few moments to complete the survey. It's just a few questions, but it is very helpful and informative for us to have that information. So we appreciate you taking the time to do it. And just briefly, a little bit about me. I'm going to be serving as the presenter. I will serve as the director of the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books, which is part of the Connecticut State Library. And we go by refer to CT Lab or the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books as a shortened form known as CT Lab. We provide books in audio and braille formats to Connecticut residents who cannot use print materials. Our patrons include people who are blind, people who have low vision, people who have perceptual or reading disabilities, and people who have any kind of physical disability that impacts their ability to use print materials. So our work at CT Lab is very much centered around accessibility and making sure that people can access not just books and magazines, but all types of communications from our library, which means that I regularly create all types of accessible digital documents. I will say, though, that when I started in this role, I was not familiar with this process at all. So it's something I've learned over time on the job. But it's become a passion of mine, and I'm happy to and eager to share information with you about accessible digital documents and the work that we do at CT Lab. And also that said, I hope that you'll you know, take from this like brief bio that, though this wasn't an area of expertise of mine when I started, it is something that with a little time and effort, I think most people can acquire these skills, employ them without much time and effort. It just takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of know-how. And hopefully these sessions are helping with that. So with that introduction, I'm going to bring up my slides. So give me a moment to get the sharing set up. All right. Can someone just put a thumbs up or something along those lines? I see Ashley giving me the thumbs up. Uh, so today's agenda for our presentation is we're going to look at the steps for creating accessible PDFs and really cover an introduction to what is the process like for verifying PDF accessibility using Adobe Pro DC. If you're not familiar with Adobe Pro DC, it is a software application that does require purchase. It's not free like the Acrobat Reader. But it is one of the most widely, if not the most widely used software application used for creating accessible PDFs. Um, there are other products out there. I'm not as familiar with those. So today we're really the process we're talking about and showing you is going to focus primarily on using Adobe Pro DC. Just a reminder, I know probably many folks have been at some of the other sessions or had a chance to interact with the videos and our workshop materials. But the benefits for accessibility, though some of the what we're talking about is designed to improve the experience for specific users or groups of users. For example, screen reader users or folks who use a keyboard to navigate, a lot of the things that we're talking about end up benefiting everyone, all users. This is just a quick reminder that while intended maybe to benefit one group, the benefits often extend beyond that group and benefit everyone. When it comes to accessible documents, what we're talking about is utilizing fonts and colors, alternative text, and document structure to improve the navigation and readability of the document. This helps screen readers, which rely on the code. And if you're not familiar with screen reading software, it is specialized software that reads the code of documents and reads it out loud to somebody who is unable to view the screen. So screen readers are primarily used by people who are blind or people who have low vision. Also can be used by people who have a reading disability or reading difference. Um, there's a range of different screen reader softwares out there. If you're curious about one, um, your your phone or your tablet, both an iPhone or iOS and Android operating systems have built-in screen reading software. Um, Microsoft products have Narrator is a screen reader that's built in to the Windows-based operating system, and Apple devices, laptops, and computers have VoiceOver built in as well. So you can always check those out if you're curious about how a screen reader works. In terms of accessible documents, these can be Word documents, emails, PDFs, etc. Um, PowerPoint slides. So it's a range of the type of documents that we tend to be creating primarily with, Office 365 um, and so forth. So turning to PDF accessibility, the slides, what we're going to do today with the slides, we're going to introduce the concept. So this will be a preview of the different steps, and then we'll turn to the actual process of converting a Word document to a PDF, and then getting into some of the basics of reviewing the PDF to make sure that it is in fact accessible. Um, but the general rule is, regardless of what type of document um, you're producing, you want to start with an accessible source document. So start with an accessible Word document or a PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet, etc. Do all of the work there, And then when you save it as a PDF, the goal is really to then just be verifying that the all of the work you did and with your source document was just carried over into the conversion when you created the PDF. It is possible to open a PDF in Adobe Pro DC and try to do the work to make it accessible, but that ends up being a lot of work. So it saves time generally if you start with a source document that's accessible, convert it to a PDF, and then just verify rather than trying to do all the work in Adobe Pro. So step one would be once you've created your source document, you've reviewed it, done all of the things that we've covered in previous sessions, like make sure you have are using alternative text for images, that you've got contextual hyperlinks if you're using links in your document, you're using header structure, font, you've checked color contrast, all of those kind of things. Once you verify that the source document is accessible, then you can save your PDF or save your source doc as a PDF. In Office 365 applications, there are two ways to do this. One is to go to File and then select Save as Adobe PDF. The other option is if you have Adobe Pro DC installed already, there will be a tab at the top of the Office 365 application that is an Acrobat tab, and you can click on the Acrobat tab, and then there is a button for Create PDF. I'll demonstrate all of this when we do get into the second part of the work. So again, this is just giving you the preview. And then once you've saved your PDF and opened the PDF, before you distribute it, there are a few things that you want to do. So the first thing is opening it in Adobe Pro DC. And then one of the things that we talked about in making other types of documents like Excel, PowerPoint, and Word accessible is that adding a document title. So if you've added the document title, we just want to verify that it's present. And we can do that by going to Menu, Properties, and then clicking on the Description tab. That will confirm, and I'll show you how all of this works, but there will be a window where there's a title field, and we just confirm that there's a document title there. The other thing we want to do in this window is then click on the Initial View tab and make sure that the window options is show document title is selected rather than file name. And it's just a reminder, the reason why we want to have the document title is because the document title should be descriptive enough to convey what the purpose of this document is. File names don't always follow those naming conventions, so we want to ensure that the somebody that's encountering this using a screen reader is getting the document title, not the file name. So that's why we're confirming the document title is there. Document title or file name is also going to be the first thing that is read that when somebody launches a file using a screen reader. So that's why we want to consider this. After we have verified that, typically what I do in my workflow is then in the Tools panel of Adobe Pro, and I've got a screenshot of that on the right side of this slide. So the Tools panel typically appears on the left side of the Adobe Pro window when you have a document open. And there's going to be a range of tools from Create PDF to Edit a PDF, Fill and Sign, Organize Pages, and so forth. And further down that list is Prepare for Accessibility. And if you don't see it in that list, there is a View More button. You may just need to click on View More to expand that list and find Prepare for Accessibility. After you've selected Prepare for Accessibility, it opens up another sort of panel that is the sort of submenu of Prepare for Accessibility. And there are a few different options there. But when we're checking for accessibility, we want to go straight for the check for accessibility button. This will open an options box, and I'll walk us through this process as part of the demonstration in a few minutes. We'll leave all of the default selections selected. So those will be sort of check boxes that we just leave checked, and then we click the Start Checking button. That will run the accessibility checker, and it doesn't take long for the accessibility checker to run. That will then yield the sort of report that is generated by the accessibility checker. And on our screen right now on the left side is a screenshot of the accessibility checker report for a document. There are a number of different categories that it is checking. It's going to check the overall document. It's going to check page content. If you are doing a form, there's a section for forms. It will look at alternative text and tables and lists and headings. So a lot of the things that we've talked about in some of the other sessions, this checker is checking for all of that. If it detects anything that needs addressing, it will create that item in bold. So in the screenshot that we have, logical reading order, dash needs manual check, and color contrast, dash needs manual check are both in bold, and they're under the document header. Um, One of the things that to know about this is that logical reading order and color contrast, you're going to be prompted to do a manual check every time you run the accessibility checker on a PDF that you're checking for accessibility. So these by default are always going to be flagged. So if you run the accessibility checker and these are the only two that you see coming up that need attention, then that it means you're off to a great start. And really, there's just a couple of other little steps, and I'll show you what the next steps would be. If there were some major errors, what you would want to do is probably go back to the source document after you figured out what those errors were, make the corrections in the source document, save it again as a PDF, and then repeat the process that we just outlined over the last few slides. It's a lot easier to change and fix things back in the source document rather than trying to do it in the PDF, um, Adobe Pro. Some fixes are easy enough to do in Adobe Pro, and we'll look at a few examples of that uh, in just a moment. So before we jump into looking at an example, are there any questions about the slide content? And you're welcome to either type questions in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, so I'm not sensing there are any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up a Word document that is our sample Word document that will walk through the steps that I just talked about in the last several moments. So uh, we're going to focus on a Word document, but by and large, the process that I'm going to show you going forward applies to PowerPoint and Excel as well. So this is my Word document, and it's already an accessible Word document. So I'm not going to like take us through that steps, but just a few things to highlight. Like we've got an image here, um, and we're using document headers to organize the content. We've got at least one link in the document. And I think there's, a couple of other links. And then as I scroll down, I think we'll also encounter a bulleted list. This bulleted list is properly formatted. And I know that because when I click anywhere into the bulleted list here in the paragraph window, the bullets button is sort of got a darker shading now and that tells me that bullets are being utilized. And I can also, in the bottom left corner of my screen here, I have my accessibility checker for Word that is running and it's telling me good to go. So I've done everything I need to know and I'm now ready, or everything that I need to do in order to create this source document that is accessible. I'm now ready to save this as a PDF. And I mentioned that there were two ways that we could do that. So one is to go to File and then Save as Adobe PDF. When I do that, it's going to launch the Save As window. And this is where I could then check for where I want to save the document. And also, I just want to highlight, first time you're kind of doing this, I recommend clicking on the Options button here and just review here. Make sure that Create Bookmarks is checked and Enable Accessibility and Reflow with tagged Adobe PDF is checked. This ensures that all of the work that you did to create this accessible document is then going to get the proper accessibility tagging or HTML tagging when it's converted to a PDF. So this is exactly how we want it to be set up. So you can just click OK in this window. And I like the file destination for this, so I'll click Save. It's now running through the conversion process. This, depending on the size of the document, might take a few seconds, but generally what happens is it's going to open the PDF in immediately after it's been saved and converted. So that is now open. I'm going to minimize the PDF window for just a moment and show you the other way that, again, this is if you have Adobe Pro DC installed on your machine. You also then will have the Acrobat tab in your Office applications. So when I click on the Acrobat tab, I can create PDF. And that's another way to save your source document as a PDF. Um, the one caveat, saving, you don't want to ever, when creating an accessible PDF, save your um, oh, sorry, not a save, but print. So if you go to File, Print, there is under Printer Options a Adobe PDF. That will not create an accessible PDF as part of this process. So make sure that you're using one of the first two methods that I showed you, either the Acrobat tab or the File Save as PDF option. Okay, now hopefully if we did a good job of creating our source document, what we're doing now is just verifying the document's accessibility, the PDF's accessibility. We'll spend a bit more time in here looking at a few of the different features. The first thing that we talked about doing is, my typical workflow is that I want to confirm that I've got the document title set up properly. And to do that, I go to the menu and then document properties, which is at the bottom of the menu. And this is a box that has multiple tabs. I've clicked on the description tab, and this actually did not have a sample or a title in the title field. So that was something I didn't do as part of the source document. That's okay. I don't have to go to the source document for this. I could just go ahead and enter my title right here into the title field. The other thing I want to do in this document properties window is then come over to the initial view tab, and right here at the bottom, right, it is where it says show. Right now, file name is selected. I can click on the drop-down menu and switch from file name and select document title. Now I can hit OK, and that is saving the work I just did, or at least adding the work I just did. It does not, Adobe Pro does not do autosave, or at least the way I'm set up, it doesn't. So this is a good moment to just pause and say, what I tend to do after I'm making any changes in my PDFs is click the save button, which is in the top right corner. And so I'm going to click that. And now it sort of gets a lighter shading, that save button. That tells me that there are no changes that are pending. I've accurately saved the work that I've done so far. So having taken care of the document title, the next step I turn to is going under the All Tools menu, which is here on the left-hand side. If for some reason this wasn't open and viewing as it is, you can just come under All Tools, and then that will open this panel for you. And I'm coming down to prepare for accessibility. Now that keeps us in the same panel, but it's given us a prepare for accessibility submenu. And what I want to do now is go ahead and check for accessibility. So this fourth option down in the list is check for accessibility. I'm clicking on that. And we're going to, everything that is checked in this accessibility checker options window, we're going to leave as it is and not make any changes. So I can then just go straight to the bottom of the window and click the Start Checking button. That opened up another panel on the right side of my screen now, and here it's the accessibility checker that is showing up top. And going down this list, remember any time that it flags any issues that you need to correct, that the as identified by the accessibility checker, they're going to appear in bold headings. So I don't have anything under any of the items except for document. So I'll click on this little arrow or chevron and expand. And here I can see these are the two items, logical reading order and color contrast, that I know I'm going to encounter every time I check a PDF for accessibility. So this is not a surprise. This is expected. What you can do, though, is if you ever encountered something that was other than these two and you want to know a little information, you can take your cursor and right click, and there's a few different options that will come up in this window, and it is context specific. So there, if you're unsure of what it is, you can always go to the explain option in this little menu, and that will take you to the Adobe website, and it'll hyperlink you directly to the issue that you've just moused over. So in this case, it would take me directly to the color contrast section, and there will be an explanation of what this is and um, some information about steps that you could use to resolve the issue. Some things you will find that in addition to pass, fail, skip, rule, one of the first options that will show up is fix. So if we don't have that option here with this option, but if you encounter the fix in this list, you can click on fix and it will open up a window that's sort of a dialog box, and it will walk you through the steps to resolve that right there. So use the fix tool if that ever is an option that shows up, but like I said, it won't appear for every single issue that's flagged by the accessibility checker. In this case, with color contrast, so let's talk about that. Um, I've I've already checked and verified in my source document that my hyperlink text has sufficient contrast to meet the WCAG level AA 2.1 standards. So I've already done that work, and there aren't any other, otherwise all of my text is black text on a white background. So I know that's got sufficient color contrast. So my next step with color contrast would be to just go back to right click and click pass. So I'm sort of telling the accessibility checker, I did that manual check. I know it's passed. If you're not sure what I'm talking about with color contrast or want access to a color contrast checker, in the accessible digital documents uh, LibGuide, if you go to the Microsoft Word or the PowerPoint presentations, in the slides, we talk about color contrast, and in the tip sheets, there's a link to a color contrast checker. So this is a quick information that's at the ready for you if you need more information about color contrast. Let me pause there before I go into anything else and see if there anything that's come up in the chat, or if folks have something they'd like to unmute and ask a question. I'll take some questions now if there are any. Ashley, I'm taking no questions right now, or
I actually have a question that just popped in. I'm trying to
oh,
make my little
perfect.
box big enough. So just to verify, if you convert a document to PDF, the only way to transfer over the accessibility features is to use Adobe Acrobat Pro, i.e., you have to pay for it. Is it possible for a screen reader to read a PDF at all if it's not converted using Pro? That's
That's
a
an
multi-part
important
question.
question
Yeah.
that I'm glad it was asked. So if you went to Files and save as PDF in your source document, like we did when we saved this Word document, it would do the accessibility tagging for you. So you don't have to worry about the question asked, like, oh, that's the only way that you're going to get your accessibility tagging. That part isn't correct. So I do want to clarify that what you are getting the tagging, you're just not able to verify it and in the way that I'm demonstrating um, without the Adobe Pro DC. What you could do though is if you did not have Adobe Pro DC and don't want to pay for Adobe Pro DC, the next step that I would recommend is if you have access to a screen reader and you can teach yourself a little bit about the basics of screen reader, how they work, and a couple of the basic keyboard commands to jump to headers and not just navigating down through the text. Then you could use a free screen reader like Narrator or VoiceOver, or there's another one that's an open source screen reader that's quite popular amongst users who are blind and low vision. That's called NVDA. That stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. And if you visit their website, it's a free download. So um, in that case, you could just skip. You wouldn't do anything in Adobe Pro DC. You would save as the PDF and then just do your testing with the screen reader. And then you're doing the manual testing with screen reader. Ultimately, even after you do, if you have Adobe Pro DC, even after you verify and check for accessibility in Adobe Pro DC, I recommend that, and I do this myself, I then do manual screen reader testing as well. So ultimately, I recommend, and most people recommend, no matter how you get that PDF, you want to, whether you do Adobe Pro DC or not, do some testing with a screen reader if you really want to make sure that it's accessible. So I'm sorry that that was a slightly longer answer, but I just wanted to make sure everybody had the information.
It's just this person did follow up saying that they do have the option in Office, but it says that it's limited to one conversion per month.
Hmm.
Um, but hopefully, if that doesn't answer your question, Vicky, please let us know and we can expand.
Yes, and certainly, this is also towards the end. I will go back to the slideshow and I'll share my email address. So if there are questions that also might warrant some follow-up or additional conversation, feel free to reach out to me directly and we'll share my email address so you can do that. And I'm happy to provide assistance and additional conversation.
And there's actually another question from Chris. And Chris, you and I were thinking the same thing. She's asking, or they are asking, excuse me, can you provide a list of free screen readers? And I had just made a note to make sure that we had that on our resource guide if we don't, but we can certainly do that.
That is, I appreciate the question. It's one of the things that I know that I've been intending to add, and I just ran out of time before this session. But yes, I will add that another page to our accessible digital documents LibGuide that has information about screen readers. And for NVDA and for all of these, you can find tip sheets, and I'll include some tip sheets too, so you can um, learn a little bit about the keyword commands. Um, they can be speaking as a sighted person. It can be a little challenging to get used to how screen readers work because they're you're interacting with the information in a slightly different way, but with a little practice, you can master the basics that you need for manual testing of documents.
Great. Someone else was just asking about, is there a session on PDF forms? And Suzanne kindly responded in the chat that yes, that is next week's topic. We added that. And so that will be on March 26th. And the link is to register for that if you are interested is in the chat as well. Um, Chris is also suggesting maybe a webinar on running a library page through a screen reader, which
Yeah, we purposefully focused this session or this series on like Office 365 applications. But that is a great suggestion. Something that actually another partner, Jeff Freed from On Focus Access, has done some of that work for us. And we'll be having Jeff back again for another series of training workshops. And he kind of focuses a little bit more on the web accessibility side
Mhm.
of things. Um, Ashley, I can't remember. We may have some resources, maybe some
We
links.
might.
I'm going to drop it in the chat right now.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, team. So we're getting some at least hyperlinked, web-based resources that you can refer to at least in the meantime.
All right.
Okay,
I think that's it for the moment, Matt.
excellent. All right, so here's where I think we'll end up spending a probably most of our time, but I will allow time for more questions, is we're going to take a look at this logical reading order and what does this mean? The logical reading order is, does the document, the tagging, is it arranged in a way that so that it flows in the same way that if we were looking at the document as a sighted person? Here's what I mean. So to check the reading order, the easiest way to do it is in this to the right of the accessibility channel is an icon that kind of looks like a tag or a label, and that is the tags panel. So now I've clicked on that icon and I get in my panel a heading that says accessibility tags, and there is a whole line of accessibility tags. This is the HTML tagging or the accessibility tagging that we set up in Word, but now we're kind of viewing how it is set up in terms of the document structure when it comes to the tagging. So this is a topic that could be almost its own session, but for today's purpose, we just need to know a little bit of information. One, the document tag is not something that a screen reader is going to read, so it's just going to ignore and skip over the document tag. But typically what happens is that is the overarching tag in our tag structure, and all the other tags fall underneath it. You also, depending on how the document works, you also might find that there is a section, or this is abbreviated as SECT for section. That is another tag that is just going to be skipped by a screen reader and won't read it. So you'll notice these if you're working in Adobe Pro TC and looking at the tag tree, but you don't really have to pay any kind of attention to them in terms of for the purposes of how it's going to read for a screen reader. What we want to focus on then are all of the tags that follow. So as I click on the H1 tag, this stands for heading 1. And in our Word document, we assigned this phrase or sentence, "Welcome to the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books," as the heading 1 tag. And back on the page of the PDF, you can see that now there is a box that is outlining heading 1. So we have a visual reference on the screen that is outlining the text associated with this tag. This is great. This is exactly what I want to see as I'm checking the document. So for the logical reading order, what the easiest thing to do is just to click on your H1 tag and then use your cursor arrows on your keyboard. I'm just going to use the down cursor key, and that will move us to H2 for heading 2. And you can see that then we have the next heading outlined with that purple pink box. Then we have a P tag, which stands for paragraph. And so that whole paragraph that is under H2 is outlined now. That's great. We can see this just repeats down H2 paragraph. Now we have H3. So H3 is a subheading of heading level 2, the types of materials that are available. So this is, again, appearing exactly as we want, and we're coming down right through the tag tree. I'm just going to, so what I would do is literally just I'm pressing the down arrow button to just move through, and this is the order that the screen reader is going to read the content. Uh, so it is corresponding with the visual layout on the page, and that's exactly what we want. So as of right now, as I work my way through the tag tree, I see nothing of concern. Everything is flowing in the proper order. Ah, here's something. You notice we went from paragraph to paragraph, but we have a heading here. So somehow a heading tag was omitted. So this is a great, like, in the moment example of how to resolve this. This is something you don't necessarily have to go back to your source document to resolve. Instead, what we can do is go back to the left side of the screen under the Prepare for Accessibility panel and check Fix Reading Order, or click Fix Reading Order. That brings up my reading order window, and it tells me to draw a rectangle around the content and then click one of the buttons below. Now, right now, all of the buttons are grayed out. I can't select that because I haven't actually made a selection or drawn the rectangle. What they mean is that now that I'm in the reading order panel, my cursor turns into crosshairs. Um, so I can take my crosshairs and I need to make changes in service appear as a heading level 2 tag. So I'm going to take my crosshair and put it just above to the left and then drag from the top left corner kind of to the lower right-hand corner so that now changes in service is outlined in the box. Once I've released the cursor key, or sorry, the mouse button, you notice back in the reading order box, all of my buttons are available to me. So I need to make changes in service, a heading 2. So I'll click the heading 2 button and notice right here, when we're viewing as reading order, we're also seeing the different tags that are associated with that. And the reason why we see that is here in the reading order, the radio button structure types is selected. If I did page content order, that will be the reading order of each box on each page. So it resets with each page. So you can see 1 through 12 on the left page, and then on the right page, because this is set up like a booklet format, we reset at the top of the next page and go 1 through 22. This is your preference, how you look at this. I like to look at it as structure types because I'm using the tag tree on the right panel to verify the reading order. So that's just kind of how I use it. So I'll click close on the reading order panel, and I'm also going to click that save button because I just made a change. And now, give me a second. Sorry, it froze for a second. So now you can see that back here, we were good up until here, and then we had a problem with changes in service in the subsequent paragraph were all as a P tag. Now we have our H2 tag as we want it. Then we go to P tag, and then we go to our L tag, which is for the list. And you can see with the L tag, it is capturing all of the bullets in this bulleted list. On any of these tags, I can click the chevron button to the left and expand the tag tree and see anything that appears beneath it. So if I were to continue, expanding that and now continue down with my down cursor key, now I am viewing each list item as I walk down through the tag tree, and I can see that those are all appearing in the correct order. Um, Under each list item, you will tend to see that there is the list body, and then this is the actual content or text container. Uh, This is sort of like getting into another PDF session, but I just wanted to point out that there, depending on the tagging, there will be some nesting. For a P tag, you can see, here we go. This is the container for that particular paragraph. But since there really isn't any changes or fixes that we need to make other than the one we just did for that heading, we have a PDF that is successfully tagged, and it is tagged in the right order. So I verified the reading order. So in my menu on the right-hand side, I can go back to the accessibility checker icon, and I can right-click over logical reading order and select pass. And now I have completed the steps that I would typically complete and verifying. Now I slowed it down, but this would probably be about 5 to 10 minutes worth of work after converting it to a PDF. So it doesn't take that much time typically. Um, what I would do next is, as we talked about a few minutes ago, is I would then open up my screen reader software and do a quick manual test to verify that I've got an accessible PDF. I will say that um, probably 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, uh, there is nothing that I encounter when testing with the screen reader that requires additional work. So when you finish this portion, you can be reasonably and pretty confident that there's not going to be anything that comes up with the manual testing in the screen reader. But that said, every once in a while something comes up, a little quirk, and the screen reader testing can be really helpful. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions, and we'll be happy to answer some questions.
Yeah,
Hey,
we have a couple of questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
that's okay. I just going along with the tags. I just wanted to know how you fix tags that might be out of the proper reading order. I'm actually running into that with
Ah,
I'm working on right now.
yeah, yeah. Uh, yes. let's actually, I have, I'm going to go into, give me 1 second. And Suzanne, I'm going to bring up one of the documents that Suzanne shared with me recently. I'm going to quickly convert this to a PDF because this one is um, a great document on a couple of different levels. Um, so I'm just quickly saving it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna bypass the first steps that I showed you with checking the document title and everything for now. That will be, if it wasn't done correctly, the prepare for accessibility checker will catch the document title for you. And that's one where the fix thing will show up. But for right now, here's an example of we have an H3 and an H2, um, and a couple of things. We probably want to make this one an H2 or maybe just a P tag. And there's a few different ways that we can change the tags. But the other thing we can do is in order to rearrange anything, and we'll come back to that. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but I'm going to come back because Suzanne has on this document a bulleted list that stretches over 2 pages. And sometimes bulleted lists that stretch over 2 pages. Here we go. This timeline, 1960s to the 1970s, we've got a bullet at the bottom of page 3 and then 2 bullets from the same list at the top of page 4. So um, let's uh, find, okay, here's that list, and it created an entirely different list for the top of page 4. So what I'm going to do, and this will get to that question that Suzanne had, that I'm going to expand both list tags to reveal the list item tags. Now I'm just going to grab list item tag, that's the first one at the top of page 4, and drag it right underneath. And you can see as I hold my cursor there, there's a horizontal line that appears under list item, and I release. Now that is underneath that. I'm going to repeat that for that third bullet, and that reveals an empty L tag. So what I'm going to do is we don't want to have any empty tags. I'm right clicking on that empty L tag and I'm going to choose to delete tag. So all we did was we just basically selected and then dragged and dropped the tag into the order that we wanted it. This can be done for any kind of tagging. So to answer Suzanne's question, um, if you want to reorder the tags, you can just drag and drop them into the order that you like. I find that it's easier to drag tags from bottom to top than top to bottom. I don't know why that is, but I don't think it's entirely personal preference. I think it's a quirk of like the way the Adobe Pro DC works. So my little tip is if you are working on the arrangement of the tags, you may need to drag something down to the bottom and then put it into position by dragging it from bottom to top. So hopefully, Suzanne, did that capture and answer your
That
question?
is, yes, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Matt.
Okay, and I said I wanted to come back to these header tags. Um, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say uh, this maybe doesn't need to be a heading tag. Or Suzanne, would you want this to be a heading tag?
Nope, that was
The,
supposed to be a paragraph.
okay,
I obviously
great.
was still in the learning process when this was
Okay, no problem.
created.
This is great. So Suzanne did nothing wrong. I want to emphasize this. This happens to us all the time. But what we have is like from our tag structure, we have an H3 before H2. The accessibility checker would flag this and say it was out of the proper nesting order. So we want to correct that. And like we can, I noticed it right away, just like looking at the tag tree. So before we even run the accessibility checker, if you happen to click into the tag panel, you can come in and make these corrections. So if we want to change the text that is now labeled as H3 to a P tag, there's a few different ways we can do that. We can go to prepare for accessibility, fix reading order, and then use our crosshairs to select that and then choose text paragraph. So that's option one. I showed you how to do this already, so I'm just going to close and not do it that way. We could just just click directly into the tag and change this from H3 to P just by typing with our keyboard. Or we could, now I've already made that change, but we could right click on the tag we want to change and go to properties. And then under content, um, I think because I didn't save it, it might not be registering. Let's try that again. Yes. So now we could choose the container tag. And from this list, as you scroll through, you can see there's all of the different tags that we might use, from your heading tags to your annotations and so forth, list tags. So we could just come in and select paragraph. I've already made that change, but that's another way. So there's three ways: using the fixed reading order, clicking directly into the tag and typing our change, or right clicking and choosing properties for the tag and going to content tab and changing the container tag to our desired tag. Um, Also, we don't have a heading one. So let's give this text, EDI and SJ bulletin, a heading one tag. And you can see as soon as I click save, it's reflected that in my tag and I've made that change. So generally speaking, just a reminder about sort of document structure, always just one heading one tag per document. Typically, it's going to be what would serve as the document title at the top of the document. And then you could have multiple H2 tags and, whatever you need to do for your other heading levels. But for the most part, just stick with one H1 tag. So I just did a couple of those examples just to show you, like, in real time, how quick some of those changes can occur.
Matt, I have a few other questions in
Yeah.
chat. So, first, I've had an issue with Adobe PDF where once I tag adjust for accessibility and save changes, the changes revert after I send the PDF, and or the PDF changes are preserved, but the color is nearly gone. Any thoughts on this?
Ooh. I'm sorry to say that I don't have any thoughts that come to it immediately, but this is a great example of I'd be happy to follow up one-on-one. So if you want to email me an example of a PDF or reach out, we can talk more about that and try to provide additional assistance.
I'm curious as well, are there any webinars on accessibility in Nitro PDF? My library will be switching to the service instead, and I'm not sure how we'll handle accessibility from here on.
That's something I'm not familiar with, Nitro PDF, but if we'll note that there's interest in perhaps workshop and more learning on this, because if your library is switching to it, there's a good chance that others might.
Hmm.
So I'll say, like, Suzanne and Ashley and I can note your interest in this topic and see what kind of workshops we might be able to schedule for the future if there's interest.
All right, and then Sorry, I'm losing my place in the chat. Okay. How long should we expect to spend on accessibility tagging, etc., if we have, say, a 30-page document?
Uh, that's a I don't want to sound like I'm not trying to answer the question. A lot of it has to do with the um, complexity of the document. So if like the example that we have here that this EDI and SJ bulletin, it is pretty much just straight text. Uh, they're probably and because the source doc was set up properly as an accessible source doc, you can see there was not much that needs to be done. I think if I ran the accessibility checker now, we would just see the usual color contrast and check reading order. If you're getting into a document that has charts and graphs and more images and more complexity, um, that does sometimes introduce additional time and complications with tagging. Not always. Um, so it really depends on just really the nature of the document and the complexity of the document and how many different elements you have going on. Um, but in theory, if it's largely a text-based document, it wouldn't be much more time than what we just demonstrated here.
This person is sharing that this document had charts and graphs, and so it definitely um, impacted it threw her off significantly, and she could not get those to work. It's a constant battle trying to battle accessibility with the technology and time,
Yeah.
which I think.
Um, so I will say that we've been going through that here on our end too. Our colleague Barbara, who focuses on statistics, she and I have been meeting a bit lately, and we've been having different conversations about things related to charts, and then of course converting reports that have a lot of charts into PDF format. That those kind of documents can take a little bit more time, but feel free to reach out because definitely I can provide some assistance. And Barbara, having gone through the process, um, you know, can also be a resource that we might be able to connect you with to share some additional tips to make sure, she's been working very closely with Excel but incorporating documents, her Excel charts and graphs and things like that into a Word document. So she may be another resource to help provide assistance. So please reach out.
Thank you, Matt. And I realize we are over time, but we are recording. So if you miss the end of this conversation, you can certainly catch it in the recording. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Folks are welcome to unmute as well.
So, while we give folks a chance to, sorry, lost my place. But while we give folks a chance to ask questions or type their questions, I do want to come back to the slideshow. Note that in the slides, there are a couple of links for PDF resources. I highly recommend the CSUN is the California State University Northridge. Um, it's their campus. They have a great sort of accessible documents page that's part of their website. This first one is PDF accessibility resources. This contains links to trainings and slideshows that they've done. And then the second is a PDF that they've put together on PDF tools. And this would be a good next step to review this information on the PDF that from CSUN after this workshop, because now you have a little bit of that foundational knowledge, but they expand and elaborate on a couple of the topics that we just covered briefly and can be a helpful tool for folks to refer back to. So I want to highlight those two resources as excellent resources. Um, and again, I promised that we'd share my contact information. That appears in the slide that is posted, the PDF version of the slides that's posted to our Creating Accessible Documents LibGuide, but it's matthew.geeza@ct.gov. So I know we had a couple of those questions that came up that either we couldn't answer right now or just require a little follow-up. So especially for those folks, please feel free to reach out and we can pick up the conversation from there. We are, as promised, having another session related to PDFs, and next Thursday at 10 a.m. we're going to take up an introduction to PDF forms. Again, we're just allowing 60 minutes, so this is going to be a quick introduction to get you oriented to the process, but it won't be one where you necessarily leave being a master of PDF forms. And then on April 2nd, we're going to have an open office hours where you can just come in, ask any questions related to any kind of accessible document. So whether it's PDFs, email, Excel, Word, and so forth, we'll just be hanging out for an hour and folks are welcome to join us and ask questions and have conversations. So this is another, again, for folks that maybe have some specific questions, it might be an opportunity if we have the time to take a deeper dive into some questions that are specific to different libraries. Ashley, before we wrap up, any questions in the chat?
No, it looks like we are good. Lots of thank
Okay.
yous.
Well, I apologize for going over, but we had some great questions, so I'm glad that there were some good questions that came out of the workshop this morning. Hopefully you're leaving here having, if this is new to you, you have a sense of, how to get started with this. If you're somewhere along the way, hopefully there was some, maybe some refresher for you or picked up a few tips along the way. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist. So with that, I'll end and say you're free to sign off, and we hope you'll join us for the next two sessions. Thanks.